It's all gone. No walls, no ruins, no towers, no structure. If you didn't know what this place was, you'd walk right past it. But this is where they built it, the Seacliff Lunatic Asylum, one of the largest buildings in 19th century New Zealand. In the late 19th century, New Zealand began building a major psychiatric institution at Seacliff, about 30 kilometres north of Dunedin. The architect was Robert Lawson, one of the OGs in early Dunedin architecture. The building was Gothic in feeling, Scottish baronial in design, and for its time, it was enormous. It had towers, long wings, locked wards, and the kind of presence that would have been hard to ignore. But the most important part of the design wasn't just how it looked. It was where they hid it. Away from the city, away from the noise, away from civilization. Because back then, this wasn't really about helping people get better. It was about getting people out of sight. People could end up locked away in places like this for all sorts of reasons. Things as minor as depression, PTSD, anxiety, old age, or even minor disabilities. Sometimes people were locked up here just because their families didn't know what to do with them. And once they were here, once they were locked away, everyone else got to forget about them. Seacliff opened in 1884. By 1891, it was already the largest asylum in New Zealand, more than 500 patients. By 1898, more than 600. The grand building on the hillside just kept filling up. They built a castle for the people nobody wanted to see. But almost immediately, the ground started slipping. In 1887, only 3 years after the asylum opened, a landslip damaged the site. The ground beneath the institution was unstable, and it had been from the start. A government inquiry later held Lawson responsible for the structural defects. Here's the irony of the situation. An institution built to contain mines the state called unstable, sitting on ground that was literally unstable. I'm not reaching for a metaphor here. That's literally what happened. Seacliff had gardens, flower beds, playing fields, tennis court. There was a farm that patients and staff could work. Meals, routines, and the small rhythms of daily life that built up in a place over nearly 90 years. For some people, it may have been more stable than what they came from. There were definitely moments of genuine kindness here. Some of the staff really did believe they were helping, but it was still an institution built on control. It was still a lunatic asylum in the 1800s. Patient labour helped keep Seacliff running. Most of the people inside hadn't committed any crime. They were there because someone with authority, a doctor, a magistrate, or even a family member, had decided that they just didn't fit outside. The official name at the time was Seacliff Lunatic Asylum. That word, lunatic, wasn't a ghost story label. It was state language. It was how people were categorised, officially, in government records. So when we talk about Seacliff being haunted, yeah, there's a lot of local law that says it is. Stories about presences on the ground, strange feelings, things people say they've seen or heard out here. And honestly, after everything that happened, of course people talk about ghosts. How could they not? One name comes up again and again with Seacliff: Frederick Truby King. King became medical superintendent in 1889. Later in life, he became famous through the Plunkett movement and his work around infant health. At Seacliff, King did improve some things: fresh air, exercise, better food, structured routine, proper staff training. By the standards of the time, some of that was considered real reform. But reform doesn't mean harmless. Reform doesn't mean safe. And it definitely doesn't mean humane. Because this was still a place where people could lose control over everything. Their body, their treatment, their future, their name, even their freedom. You could be locked away here because someone with authority decided you didn't belong outside. And once that happened, the doors closed behind you. Later in Seacliff's history, patients were given electric shock treatment, Others in New Zealand's psychiatric system were put through insulin coma therapy, deliberately pushed into medical comas in the hope it might reset the brain. And then there was lobotomy, brain surgery, not because someone had a tumour, not because there was something physically broken that needed repairing, but because the person was considered difficult, chronic, or beyond help. Janet Frame was almost one of them. She had been through the system. She had already been misdiagnosed. She had already been subjected to treatment that made her fare worse. And at Seacliff, she was scheduled for a lobotomy. Her mother signed off on it. The operation was only cancelled after her writing won a major literary award. That is terrifying. Not because it sounds like a horror movie, but because it actually is. Except this version had paperwork, a signature at diagnosis, a decision that was made in an office. And suddenly, your mind doesn't belong to you anymore. So when people say Seacliff is haunted, I don't question it. A place like this doesn't just let go of what happened here. Because if pain leaves a mark on a place, then this place was marked again and again and again. Not just by death, by fear, by restraint, by people crying behind locked doors, by people who came here alive and were slowly stripped of every choice they had. And the worst part is, most of the people who passed through Seacliff left almost no public trace. Their names might be in records somewhere if those records survived, if their families can access them. But their voices mostly didn't make it out. Janet Frame's did. That's why we know even part of what this place could do to a person. But thousands of others didn't get to write their way out. And the 37 women in Ward 5 didn't get out at all. Ward 5 was a 2-storey wooden building attached to the main stone hospital at Seacliff. It housed women the institution had classified as difficult, women under heavier restriction and supervision than the rest of the hospital. At night, Ward 5 was locked. The windows were shuttered and locked. Most of them could only be opened with a key held inside the ward. During the Second World War, staffing across the hospital was stretched thin. The night check came but once an hour. On the night of the 8th of December, 1942, fire broke out in Ward 5. By the time the fire was noticed, the building was already well ablaze. 39 women were in that ward. 37 died. Only 2 escaped. 37 women behind locked doors. The cause of the fire was never definitively determined. But what was determined was enough. Timber construction, locked windows, wartime staffing shortages, inadequate fire protection, all of it was criticised after the fact. The inquiry recommended sprinklers in mental hospitals. That recommendation came after 37 people were already dead. The Ward 5 fire made Seacliff the site of one of the deadliest fires in New Zealand's history. And most people don't even know it. They know other disasters, other names, other dates, but not this one. Families have spent decades trying to understand what happened to relatives inside Seacliff. Accessing records has often been difficult, slow, or painful. That's another layer of the story. This didn't end when the fire went out. It didn't end when the buildings came down. For some families, Seacliff is still not finished. Seacliff officially closed in 1973. Patients and operations shifted to Cherry Farm Hospital. The main building had already been demolished by 1959. The last remaining structure on the public reserve came down in 1992. So now you come here and this is what you find. Grass, a small concrete remnant, trees, a quiet public reserve named after Truby King. And if no one tells you, you'd never know that one of the largest institutions in New Zealand once stood right here. But people do come back here. They write about this place. They keep telling the story, even now, even with nothing left to see. I think I understand why. Seacliff is one of the most haunted locations in New Zealand. Ghost tour operators talk about it. Urban explorers have written about strange presences on the grounds. Paranormal communities still treat it as one of the country's active sites. And I'm going to be totally honest with you. I believe it. I believe this place is haunted. Not because every story is automatically true, Not because every noise in the trees is a ghost, but because some places carry too much pain to ever feel empty. Nearly 90 years of people locked away here. People frightened, restrained, and forgotten. 37 women dying in a locked wooden ward while the fire took the building around them. That doesn't vanish because the walls go away. Maybe the buildings came down, but I don't believe this place is empty. I believe something stayed here. I'm not here to prove this place is haunted. You can come here for yourself and feel it. You don't need the ruins for that. The weight is already here. So this is what's left. Grass, trees, a small piece of concrete. One of the largest institutions in New Zealand stood here once. A locked ward burned down here. 37 women died here, trapped inside a building that should never have been able to burn the way it did. And now most people drive past without knowing. But some stories don't disappear just because the walls are gone. That's Seacliff. I'm Anthony. This is Southern Static. Remember the people this place was built to make invisible. Stay safe and stay out of the static.